being part of the Black community, sometimes individuals have a notion that the struggle is part of the Black experience.
Ooh, talk to me
and
about that. What do you mean by that?
Everything black on black. If I studied that facts on facts.
Welcome back to another episode of the Black is the New Rich podcast. We are on episode 31. Today we got a very special guest, especially because of the last two episodes been about marriage, therapists, trauma, and today, actually therapy. So today I finally brought the therapist on to just because our community is very on and off about therapy. So I decided to bring a therapist on to ask her abundance of questions about therapy, but I don't want to keep talking. Can you introduce yourself, please?
For sure. Hi, my name is Zara. You know this. I am a registered social worker and I practice psychotherapy.
Dope. So how long have you been doing it?
So I'm a recent graduate.
Yeah.
I've been performing therapy for a couple years now, and then specifically psychotherapy, 6 months.
6 months. How's that been going so far?
Honestly, I'm very privileged that I enjoy my job so much. I'm one of the few lucky people because we spend most of our life working.
Yeah.
And because it is such a rewarding job and I enjoy it so much, I'm thriving, honestly.
Okay. Yes, that energy. Okay, dope.
Yeah.
So I want to take it back a little bit before the therapy, before you got into the practice. What made you get into this field? Because it is a heavy thing to do.
Yeah. So I would say going back in time, naturally, I'm the person in the friend group or in the family that people are able to kind of rely on, open up, be vulnerable, and share what they're going through. I enjoy taking on that role.
Yeah.
And then studying, I was really into psychology, learning about why we behave the way we behave, why we think the way we think. And then when I came across social work, it was kind of all of my morals, ethics, and things I enjoy kind of came together really well. Serving my community. So I'm obviously a Black individual. So working with other people of color and Black communities was really important to me. So doing community work through social work, as well as the clinical side of things, psychotherapy and the healing. Yeah, that's where I landed.
Okay. So a little birdie told me that you're the person, let's say at a party, be sparking conversations with people and they just start crying or just breaking down. How does that feel in your normal life?
I enjoy it. I really do. It's a really rewarding thing to be able to connect with people in that sense. And it's funny. Yeah, I find myself in the randomest situations, like in line at Wonderland or at a party or at the grocery store. Yeah. People find it easy to kind of open up to me and go through heavy topics. And it's great. There are times maybe I'm turn off your therapy brain and just be Zara.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I enjoy it.
Okay, dope. So I want to get right into it. Obviously our community, it's therapy is a little bit of a taboo subject. And I've heard comments why would I ever go talk to a therapist? What can they tell me? They're strangers, ray-tay-tay. So what do you have to say about that?
It's interesting. Being part of the Black community, sometimes individuals have a notion that the struggle is part of the Black experience.
Ooh, talk to me about that.
What
do you mean by that?
So having hardships growing up, whether it's poverty, whether it's hardships, because your caregivers and the way that you were raised, your environment, the way society treats and reacts to Black people and Black communities, it's not positive, right? And I think sometimes people are in an area of just acceptance and it is the way it is. So I feel the Black struggle is just a part of life. So why seek therapy if it's the process of being a Black individual today?
Okay.
Which is very concerning. Even hearing it out loud, I'm
Yeah. So what do you say to those type of mindsets? How do you combat that? How do you break through that?
It's just trying to help the person understand that human life is hard for sure.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that your existence should be a struggle. When you're noticing that, that's an area, it's a red flag.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going through a lot. How can I navigate this? Do I need outside help, or do I need to maybe just focus on myself, get help from my social circle, or do I need a professional now to step in, right? Because of course, if you're privileged and lucky enough to have people in your close life, like your friends and your family that you can rely on, someone and you feel comfortable in order to share, that's great.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying this episode. Please remember to subscribe, comment, and like. Black is the New Rich.
Great. But there are times where mental health struggles need intervention, right? And it can get to a point where it gets a little too dark and we lose people, right?
Yes.
And then at that point, we can't do anything.
Yeah.
It's too late.
So you're trying to combat that before that all happens.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is, like, for example, if I'm looking to go to therapy, what am I looking to accomplish? What should people kind of be their outlook towards that?
Therapy. I think it's based on the individual and why you are seeking therapy. And there can be a number of reasons why individual seeks therapy.
Yeah.
So what is the point of therapy, right? Therapy is a tool to help you navigate through life with difficulties, whether you're having a difficulty in a life transition, whether you're having difficulties in relationships, difficulties in understanding yourself and your emotions and how and why you react to things. Grief, that's a really big one. People sometimes have a hard time kind of navigating on their own and realize I need some outside help. Some indicators of when is a good time to ask for help. I would say paying attention to huge shifts in your behavior. If you find that you're typically a happy-going person, full of energy, and then now there's a dramatic shift where you're a lot lower energy, even body tone, you're losing interest in things that you normally would be interested in.
Or what about like acting out impulsively?
Absolutely, yeah. Being easily triggered. And you find that now your reaction to things is a lot more kind of over exaggerated and maybe a little bit more aggressive. Maybe you're shutting down when you typically wouldn't shut down. Communication is harder for you now. A big one is noticing shifts in your eating and your sleeping schedule. Whether now I'm eating too much or I'm eating too little. I'm sleeping too much or sleeping too little. We know that Health Canada said that shifts in your appetite and your weight is a sign of depression. Constantly worrying about everything is also a sign of anxiety. So things like that
are
indicators that maybe I need some outside help. Another big one is if people in your life mention something. Sometimes it's hard for us to notice things about ourselves.
100%.
And it goes right over our head.
100%.
So if an outsider is noticing something, maybe be open to that. Hear them out. And then that could be an indicator of maybe I need some help.
So earlier on, you mentioned grief, right? And I feel like when people hear grief, a lot of people just think about someone passing away, but we go through many different types of grief, like, for example, heartbreak or losing a dog or something like that. Are those things still a warrant to like get therapy, even though it's not about death?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. And I think a big stigma around therapy is that it should be reserved for the really severe things. The person that's going through psychosis, somebody with severe depression or anxiety, that therapy should be reserved only kind of for them. Absolutely not. If you find anything in your day-to-day life you're having a hard time managing and that outside influence that's objective could help, therapy's for you. If you have a hard time achieving a goal or figuring out what your goals are, therapy is for you. I would say go to therapy before you feel kind of like you're broken and hopeless. If you're able to kind of pick on these things early, it's going to be a lot easier for you. So you mentioned depression earlier. What are some indicators that you might be depressed? So there's lots. Again, shifts in mood. Appetite. Oversleeping. Absolutely. Overeating, undereating. Loss in interest. That's a really big one. Loss in interest and the feeling of hopelessness. That's a big one with depression. Not being able to see the light on the other end. Depression is more about you're kind of stuck in the past and things you've been through. Anxiety is more of the future, the worry of the future.
That's why it's good to stay in the present moment.
As difficult as
I know it's hard. It is hard, definitely. So I'm hearing, like you said, you're a psychotherapist. So there's different types of therapy.
Yes.
Can you break down the different types of therapy and why and what types are they and why someone should like look for certain things?
Specific therapies. Yeah. So there's lots of different therapies. Under psychotherapy, there's 5 main domains. So we have behavioral therapy, cognitive therapy.
And that's just under yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Humanistic. We have, sorry, I'm drawing blanks.
Yeah, no worries.
There's 5 main domains. What you notice is that mainly therapists work under multiple.
Okay.
So you're not going to just be working as, for instance, a cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is working on cognition and how your maybe some delusional thoughts might be affecting your behavior. So cognitive
like paranoia ish.
Paranoia. Your thoughts might not be grounded in reality. So because of that, it affects the way that you behave.
Can you give me an example of like thoughts that might not be grounded in reality?
Okay. An example. Say you're the type of person, and we'll get a little bit into this later on. You're very anxious.
Okay.
And you need a lot of validation.
Yeah.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. I know.
Re-ask the question.
Yeah. No, I was asking different. Sorry.
Why you would need, how to, challenge those thoughts. Okay,
yes.
Okay, so how you would kind of challenge those thoughts. Say you're an anxious person, you need a lot of validation in your relationships. Something like not getting a response via text in what you think is an appropriate amount of time might have
now you're making up stories.
Spiraling, right?
Okay.
You're drawing connections that aren't necessarily there. So something that cognitive behavioral therapy does is really tries to get you to realize that those thoughts aren't real.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying this episode. Please remember to subscribe, comment, and like. Black is the New Rich.
One of the techniques to do that, and the way I like to explain it is when you do some math work when you're in grade school and you have to answer a question and at the bottom it says, show your work.
Yeah.
How did you get to 12?
Yeah.
And sometimes you realize when you're doing the equation, I did it wrong. And that's why the answer is not correct.
Okay.
So when you're challenged to show your work, explain to me how
you got
those connections and 1 + 1 is 2. Really quickly, you're like,
this is not it.
I don't have the proof for this. This doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Wow. And it is a very humbling experience because to you in the moment, it's very real, right? It's a very, very real experience. So
because to be honest, like I consider myself a very analytical person, so I try to put dots together, and if I don't put if I don't get these answers from outside sources, I will sometimes make up like this has to be that. That's a warning sign, isn't it?
Not necessarily a warning sign. It's something to be aware of. Like self-awareness is a huge thing. So sometimes things might not be like bright red signs, maybe a yellow sign, something to pay attention to. In the moment when it's happening, notice it. Take a minute, pause, and try to train your brain to think differently. Train your brain to catch it as it's happening. Once you continue to do that, it gets easier and easier to kind of move away from finding your own answers and just living more in reality and for what you actually see and know as facts and real.
Okay. Do you have any like recommendations about like, for example, like, should I seek like a male therapist or should I seek a female therapist? Is that a thing or should I just kind of like go with whatever?
So I would say do what makes you the most comfortable.
Okay.
The way seeking out a therapist works.
Yes. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So typically the way it works is you're going to first have a consult with a therapist. And what this is, it's free of charge. And it's a really short conversation for you to get to know the therapist a little bit. The therapist gets to know you very briefly. You hear their voice. Is this somebody that I can listen to? First of all.
Yeah.
And you just kind of get to know each other a little bit.
Okay.
In my initial consults, I like to really promote to speak to lots of different therapists.
Yes, good.
Don't necessarily find one and be like, okay, this could work and stick to it. It could, but think of it almost as an interview process. You're going out and you're doing multiple consults and interviewing different therapists.
Yeah.
Maybe try a woman, maybe try a man, maybe try someone that specializes in one area versus a different area. I definitely encourage that because everybody else in this world. Your teachers, your doctors, there's others you connect with more than others, right?
True.
And just because it's the first person or the first therapist that you picked, it might not be the greatest match for you. So yeah, that's kind of the first step. And I would say whatever makes you feel comfortable. A lot of the times people don't necessarily don't know what makes them feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And that consult will help.
Okay, so it's about like just finding your connection so you can feel comfortable to let it off.
Absolutely.
Basically.
Yeah.
Okay. So lately I'm hearing a lot about attachment styles in our lives, like avoidant attachment. Do you know all the attachment styles?
Yeah,
What are they?
So what attachment theory is, it tells us that we form our attachment style in our infancy, so in the first year of our life.
Okay.
And we form it based on our connection or
lack of connection
with our caregiver and how we form intimacy in relationships.
Okay.
So there are 4 types.
Okay.
Secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and fearful avoidant attachment.
Okay.
The 3 latter are all insecure attachments. So
what does that mean? Sorry.
So secure attachment is the good, comfy spot. That's where you want to be. Yeah.
Okay.
So being anxious, avoidant, or fearful, those are all insecure attachment styles.
Okay.
Something to know off the bat, you don't necessarily have control over your attachment style because this is something, again, that was formed so early in life.
So it's innate. Now it's
out of your control. Yeah. Your
attachment you can't change that.
Not that you can't change it, but the attachment style that you have is based on your experience as an infant.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's deep.
So a little bit about them.
Yeah, okay.
So what somebody with the secure attachment would look like, and that's a really healthy relationship.
Yeah.
And this is somebody that's confident with themselves and with their relationships. They feel comfortable in order to trust others and have others trust them. They're able to love others and give love and show affection. Again, they're of course very secure.
Yeah.
They're okay with boundaries. If their partner wants to take a step back, that is something that they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And we'll see this is usually someone that had a caregiver that was very attentive, that really was there to respond to their needs and their wants. So that is the soft spot. That's where we all are working to be in secure attachment styles. And then you have somebody that is an anxious attachment style. Yeah. And again, this is somebody that has a fear of abandonment. They usually can be described as somebody that's maybe clingy.
Yeah.
They might need a lot of validation.
True.
Okay. And this is because their caregiver was a little bit wishy-washy. There'd be times where they would show them the affection and be attentive, and then there are other times there would be distant.
Okay.
So they don't know who to trust. They really want that the feeling of love and to be loved. Yeah. But because they're so anxious about it, sometimes they come across as clingy, overdramatic, a little bit too needy.
Yes.
Then that is followed by avoidant attachment. Yeah. And that is somebody that has the fear of intimacy.
Yeah, that sounds like me.
That sounds like you, yeah. So somebody with an avoidant attachment style needs to create distance.
Yeah, for sure, that's me.
Right? And although love and intimacy is important, it sometimes makes them a little bit uncomfortable. And they can be in relationships, but they do need some distance. Yeah. And that. How's
my upbringing? Sorry, Mom.
So, yeah, no worries. So your upbringing with somebody that your caregiver, you became an avoidant attachment style. Yeah. You were not necessarily, your needs and wants weren't
met early. And what age group are you talking about, or when you say early?
Infancy. I think they say 7 to 11 months, your attachment style is developed, right? And if you think about, if you ever took an early psychology class, it was a study about twins. And one was given love and affection, and the other one was almost a little bit neglected. Wow. And how they respond and their attachment styles and what that looks like. Yeah. And then the final one is, sorry, 1 second. I want to make sure I get the word right.
Yeah, no worries.
I think it's fearful attachment, also known as.
You said avoidant, anxious, secure. Those are the 3 that I've heard.
And then the last one is a mix of both. It is fearful avoidant, I believe. Yeah. Okay. So the final attachment style is fearful avoidant,
Yes.
and that is a mix of both the anxious and the avoidant.
That sounds rough.
So it is rough because there is a deep longing for love and affection, but then opposite side, there's wanting nothing to do with it.
Ooh, so what does that look like in someone's adult life?
So what does that look like in an adult life? It's back and forth. It's the deep longing to want to build connections and love and intimacy, but at the same time being uncomfortable with it and not being able to be vulnerable
And not being
and
committed
trust.
to it.
And commitment's a big one. Yeah.
But wanting it deep down.
But wanting it, but having a hard time.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
and the parent or the caregiver, for instance, would be kind of an environment that's a little bit harsh, a little bit aggressive,
okay.
Where the kid didn't maybe feel necessarily safe. So trust wasn't built, even though that longing of connection was wanted.
Yeah.
Which is why you see the wanting to chase after the love and the intimacy and build healthy relationships, but then there's the fear of, again, abandonment and trust and. Yeah.
So when someone goes into therapy about their attachment styles, like what sort of things are they being told so they can become more secure?
One thing about learning about attachment styles is when you do start to learn about them and what happened, and then you kind of reflect about your upbringing and who your caregivers are and kind of what they went through. It's a humbling experience because it gives you kind of an explanation, right?
Do you have to forgive?
Yes, to forgive and also be a little easier on yourself.
Okay.
Because in some of these attachment styles, like we mentioned, you are seeking after these things, but you're still having a hard time. And yes, these things are, in your control and you are behaving in these ways, but it's as a result of, the way that you were raised in infancy. Yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Okay. No, that's dope. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you about individual cases or anything like that, but what do you see as a collective from the Black community right now?
Okay.
From your standpoint.
Yeah. So what I mentioned before was cognitive behavioral therapy, and there's a lot of science backing up CBT, and it's a really popular one. So usually people are like, oh, like I want to find a therapist that's CBT certified, they practice CBT. Many of my consults, particularly of people of color and Black individuals, when it's not their first time in therapy, they're like, if you do CBT, I want nothing to do with you.
Why? So sorry, what's CB?
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay, yes.
Kind of challenging your thoughts to improve or change your behavior.
Okay, why though?
So we are finding now, and I know there's a lot of discussion around all of these ideologies, theories, and models were obviously founded and created by white cis men. Sometimes they don't fit well with our narrative and our experience.
Okay.
Right. And of course we can pick and choose certain things that work, but we find sometimes it doesn't. It's not a blanketed thing.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that to be the true experience of my clients.
Yeah.
What I am finding with our community is truly they're looking for a space to let out what is in here and what's in here.
And that's it.
They are literally looking for a space to be heard.
Yes.
I've had so many clients that are like, I'm not even necessarily looking for tools or techniques or guidance.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a safe space to be heard and to be validated, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of our experience, unfortunately, we're not validated.
Yes.
And that means a lot to our inner child. So being able to find a space and build a therapeutic relationship with a therapist that provides you with that does a lot of healing. And then of course, they're helped with different techniques and tools to use with different like anxiety and panic and goal setting and stuff like that for sure.
Yeah.
But I find specifically with the Black community, they're looking for a safe space to be heard.
Yeah, because a lot of us, Caribbean culture especially, it's like you are to be seen and not to be heard. And I guess now when someone grows up, they're like, whoa, I have so much stuff inside of me that I want to let go. So that makes sense to what you just said.
Absolutely. And to be fair, therapy can be very awkward and weird at first. Like, I am a stranger. You don't know me.
Yeah.
How do I allow myself to be vulnerable? But what we find is because they weren't offered this space, the turnaround time is so quick.
Really?
In most of my sessions, in the first session, I'm really able to get into the nitty gritty. They're able to get emotional and like tears.
First session?
Yeah.
I feel like personally, like I'd go into therapy and the first session I'd probably be bullshitting.
You think so?
Yeah, just to be like just to gauge someone's energy and what I think. Like what are some, I guess, tips so people can not do what I might do? Yeah.
So your therapist knows this, for one. And for two, they are coming into, so your first, I would say 1 to 3 sessions is going through your history and your background.
Okay.
Right? And me trying to understand you and your experience and what you've gone through. Doing this brings out, of course, lots of emotions. I'm asking you about things maybe you haven't even emotionally processed, right? And you find that when you're speaking, you're being probed and questioned. Sometimes you don't have breaks, and you're just like, okay, and you're going and you're going and you're going. And a lot of the times, clients reflect and they're like, wow, I didn't know that I had the ability to be that vulnerable that fast.
Yeah. Okay, so that leads even to my next question. How long should someone give a chance to therapy to see results? Like obviously a couple sessions may not give you the results and then you go and bash it or whatever. So what's like a good length?
So this is a discussion you're going to have with your therapist. And I would say it depends on what you're in therapy for. If you're in therapy to kind of work through your childhood trauma, that is not something that is going to happen in a couple of sessions. Okay. Right? You're working through a lot. There are short forms of therapy available for people, whether it's you're having a hard time, like for example, reaching a goal. Right? You might not need to be in therapy for years and years and years, right? Your therapist is there to kind of help you narrow down what you want, what your goals are, and help you achieve it. It's kind of easy to see the end result of something like that, right? Okay. And to know, okay, I've reached my goals. Maybe now is a good time to terminate the therapy. I also have had clients where things are going well and they're like, I'm at a pretty good point. I'm going to pause for now.
And then come back later.
And come back when I feel like I need to come back. I've had clients pause for a couple weeks, a couple months. Something goes wrong, or they're like, I feel like I'm falling off track. I just kind of need to get back in the swing of things, focus on my mental health again. So it's a conversation you'll have with your therapist in the beginning. Also, what are you looking for? I have clients that will either scale more. So if it's, I'm seeing them bi-weekly, they're realizing this isn't enough. I need to see you weekly. Or if I'm seeing them weekly, they're like, this is going great. We're going to fall back to bi-weekly. So you have a lot of say in it as well. And then based on kind of what you're seeking therapy for, gauges.
Okay, cool. So I have some questions for you. Dealing with everyone's like, I don't want to say worst days, but like everyone's kind of problems or issues or concerns. How do you debrief and let that go? And is that difficult?
It definitely can be difficult. Burnout is definitely a real thing in this field. I think what helps stay motivated and on top of things is understanding what your personal boundary is, understanding what's my limit.
Give me an example of a personal boundary or limit that you might have.
For example, if I find that I'm too exhausted and I'm not able to be fully attentive and really actively listening in my sessions, I'm a little burned out. Maybe I need to scale back how many sessions I'm taking a week. If a session was very heavy for me, it might have been triggering because I'm also an individual with my own personal experiences, right? I acknowledge that. I don't kind of push it back to the side and keep going. I realize, I might be having a reaction to this, especially if it's like a visceral reaction. I notice like my hands are sweating or shaking or my stomach's turning.
So you pay attention to all these things.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
And it doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. And I acknowledge that and sit with that and kind of do my own reflection and why that's happening. I do a lot of journaling.
You have to.
I have to keep on top of things and what day is it? Where am I? What's going on? And that really helps kind of taking it out of my body and my space and putting it onto paper. Self-care is a really big one. And what does self-care look like for me as an individual? It looks like getting my to-do list done.
Do therapists do therapy?
Like, do they seek therapy? I would say very confidently. Like 99% of therapists out there have their own therapist.
Okay, so this is just my thought. I feel like you're a therapist, right? And I feel like if you were to go to a therapist, it's like, I know what you're doing. Like, you know, so isn't that difficult to get past that barrier?
Okay, so I'm going to speak from my personal experience.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to say yes and no.
Okay.
You are also really blinded to things that are happening in your life, right?
True.
And because it's your life and it's been your normacy for so long, you have a hard time seeing it from an objective lens.
Okay.
Which is why your therapist cannot be your friend or your family member, right? They're not going to be able to kind of help you navigate or give you advice.
Yeah, makes sense.
From
it's
an
biased.
objective lens. It's extremely biased. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some practical ways that the everyday person that may not be in therapy right now can practice just like being more in the moment and just living a better life? Like, because you mentioned journaling, that's what sparked that thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what else?
There's lots out there. I would say definitely practicing mindfulness and
Yes.
different mindfulness techniques. I would definitely encourage. It's something that I do in my own work and in my own personal life.
Gratitude?
Meditation, using resources. There's so many resources that are out there, books and apps. Utilizing the people in your social circle, and then also paying attention to these things are all great and they're helpful, but is there a time where I need outside intervention?
Okay, cool. So I'm not sure if you would have the answer for this, but like, let's say like growing up, obviously I'm a Black man, so growing up, it's like emotions are not really talked about how maybe they should. So like growing up, we're like, oh, you're the tough guy, this, that, and the third. How can we kind of break those type of norms and that type of I'm not sure the word to say, but like just break that norm and be more vulnerable.
Maybe.
Yeah.
An expectation
An
of the
expectation,
Black male experience.
Exactly. How can we break that?
Yeah.
Because it's BS, to be honest.
Absolutely, right? And like there are times where, of course, I'm going to be a strong individual, and there's times where I need to be vulnerable and be
soft.
taken care of, right?
Soft,
and like lean on other people and not just have everybody lean on me. The way that we break that is in conversations, in people in our circles, in our lives, and recognizing that might be what society and others have you subscribe to, but that's not the reality that I have to live within. I can work on learning how to be vulnerable and work through the uncomfortable feelings that they bring, and acknowledging that it might make you feel uncomfortable, but you might not feel like that forever. The more you open up, the more you are able to be vulnerable, the easier it gets for you. So just practicing.
Okay. And how do we make sure that, like, for example, I'm not just emotionally dumping on someone too, right? I feel like that balance is very key to be self-aware about.
Absolutely. I would say one thing is kind of acknowledging the person's responses to you.
True.
If usually they're very engaged and helping you kind of go through your story and work through it, and you're noticing maybe they're like, oh, okay, that's cool, a little bit detached, you might be doing a bit much.
Okay.
You might be doing a bit much. Some of the work I do with my clients too is teaching them how to get a voice, and also from that perspective say, hey, I might not be in the greatest place right now. I'm going through my own things. Right now might not be a time for me to be here for you.
Oh, okay, cool.
And people have a hard time saying that, which is why you find, oh, they're comfortable with this. Let me continue. Let me keep trauma dumping, right? They're not saying anything. They might also have a hard time saying something and speaking up. So just acknowledging that you're very lucky to have these people in your lives, but they also have their own experience and their struggles, right? So maybe, hey, is this a good time? Are you in a good space for me to kind of dump all of this on you? Yes or no? Give them the option to, maybe, than just rather, this is what's going on.
Yeah. Because sometimes it's a lot and you're like, holy, like I would love to help you, but
not right now. Yeah, not right now. We'll circle the block and come back to this.
Okay, dope. So do you have any practical ways that people can work on their boundaries? Because boundaries is a hard thing to even identify within yourself sometimes, but like, what are some ways that we can work on our boundaries?
Definitely step one is trying to identify what your boundaries are. So
True.
first of all, learning what is a boundary. We hear the word boundary.
Yeah, what is a
time.
boundary?
What on God's green earth is a boundary?
Yeah.
So a boundary is something that's going to help you feel safe, feel loved and happy and comfortable.
Okay.
A boundary is something you set for yourself, and it's an expectation for people to meet in order to make you feel happy and safe.
Oh, okay.
Right? So it's important for you to understand your boundaries so that you can share your boundaries with other people.
Okay.
If people are breaking or crossing boundaries, but they're not necessarily aware of what these boundaries are, what they look like, it's hard for them to not do that,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So step one is kind of doing some self-reflection, figuring out what makes me happy, what makes me feel safe, what does a healthy relationship look like for me, what are my needs, what are my wants, what are my deal breakers, and kind of formulate that boundary. And then working on how do I share this with people in my life, not even just loved ones. It can also be coworkers, your boss, right? Like I have boundaries for everybody in my life. How do I share it in a way where it's received well? And then hopefully respected.
Okay, dope. And where are some resources where we can like find therapists? Like what are the websites? What are like, what do we Google?
Yeah.
Where can we find?
A good one is Psychology Today. Is it Psychology Today?
So yeah, go ahead, check that out. And Black therapists too.
Absolutely, yeah. So I would definitely say you need to utilize social media. Yeah. Social media right now is wild. Even just going on my Instagram, the amount of therapy pages that aren't necessarily attached to a therapy, but it can be here's some therapy advice, quick little like reminders.
Actually, a couple
memes.
of them follow after like a couple of episodes now. So I have a bunch of therapy pages that came to follow.
And those pages usually have resources on there. The internet is very helpful. Let me make sure. I believe it is Psychology Today.
Yeah, no worries.
Where you can go in and look for therapists, type in some keywords. So it's Psychology Today. And like I said, I definitely encourage doing multiple consults, especially if it's your first time. Get out there, have multiple conversations, see what kind of energy, what kind of voice makes you feel comfortable. Okay,
dope. I want to give you a scenario, and it's something around like mother's wounds. Okay. So, for example, I'm talking about like this. Let's say single. Let's talk about the boy that was raised by his single mom, right? And that mom had to play both roles. So maybe she was a little tough at times, more tough than maybe the average mom would be. And now that boy grows up and finds himself, he can't listen to women as maybe he should, and he's carrying this baggage from obviously his mom trying to do the best, but she came off a little tough. How do you know, or how does that boy that turned into a man know when, hey, my thought process has to change, and what can he do to like break those beliefs? Cycles. I would say a simple answer is going kind of back to attachment theory. Oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then also understanding that when someone has gone through some form of trauma in their life and it's unhealed, when they have children, it's going to come up, and it's going to affect the way they raise their children, the way they react to things, the way they're able to be there and show up. Because at the end of the day, that single mother, that caregiver is also an individual with their own experiences, their own trials and tribulations. And it's hard. It is for sure. I think the onus is on yourself a lot. And that's what may make it a bit easier, is understanding that I have the control in order to recognize maybe some of these problematic attachment styles, these problematic behaviors as a result of my upbringing. So what can I do to change it? Sometimes the focus is on the caregiver and the hurt, and that's fair. And you have your own, hurt to kind of unpack and go through and heal from, for sure. Absolutely. But putting the control in yourself. Exactly. What can I do? How do I heal my trauma so that when I have children, it's not a generational thing where
now it's going on to them and then their kids and then their kids and their kids and their kids. How do I break the pattern? Self-awareness is a huge part. Being able to recognize these patterns and these problematic behaviors and ways of thinking and communicating, and challenging them. Can you do that on your own? Or again, do I need outside intervention?
Okay. One thing, I drew a blank for a second. Sorry.
I did that so many times.
So this is my question. It's kind of going back to the attachment styles. Is it actually possible for someone to be 100% in the secure space?
You can definitely waver for sure. And like different situations and circumstances, different people coming in and out of your life might affect you in different ways where you're like, I don't typically react this way.
Okay.
Or I typically don't have emotions this strong. Going back to the self-awareness things, paying attention to these things and maybe realizing that it might not be a me thing. Maybe this person came in and just really shook things up and pushed me to a point where now I'm reacting this way. Let me take a step back. What needs to change? What needs to come into my life, leave my life? How am I navigating this?
Okay, dope. I want to ask you a couple questions that I ask every single guest on the show.
Okay.
The first one is, I want to know what is the best advice that you've ever received in your life. You don't have to mention any names. And what is the worst advice that you've received in your life?
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah. No worries. Take your time.
Best advice. Okay, I would say the best advice I've ever received, and not necessarily from one person, but I guess after different examples, is that you don't have complete control. No matter how bad you want it, how hard you try, or even if you think you do.
I feel like that's therapeutic advice right there.
You do not. And accepting that is very healing. And the worst advice I ever got, I would say maybe around, again, the stigma that we see also in the Black community is that mental health struggles can go away on their own.
Elaborate on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, because that's definitely not true. If we're dealing with something like a chemical imbalance, there's medication needed for that. That's not something that can go away. Okay. Something like severe depression, that is something that needs to be managed with medication. Things like different psychological disorders may need to be managed, right?
I have another question that leads off of that. What do you even think about like all these medications and for depression and stuff like that? Like, do you think people like, is that absolutely needed? Because I'm a person that I'm like, no medication. But you just said that people might need it because of the chemical imbalance. So what's your thoughts on it?
I think in many areas, and not just my necessarily field, medicine is great. Science is fabulous. I 100% back it and support it.
Okay.
I think that it should be a last resort.
Okay.
When you've kind of exhausted all your other options.
Okay.
It's not working.
Yeah.
You might need to kind of dive into that.
Does it fix the problem or does it cover the problem?
So when we're talking about something like depression, and it's an imbalance, it's helping to kind of neutralize things and balance you out, right? Traditional therapy and like self-work is not going to do that for you, right? Like
no matter what you do.
And the way I try to explain mental illnesses is the same way as a physical illness. If you have cancer, cancer is not going to just leave your body with prayer. And neither is mental illness. So you need chemotherapy and you need radiation to help you hopefully feel better. Again, hopefully. Medication is not necessarily an answer. It doesn't completely 100% heal you. A lot of the times medication is paired with other things like therapy.
Okay, dope. So my last question. So we like to make predictions on the show. So I want to play this 5 years from now. And Zara, I want to be like, Zara said she was going to do this.
Yes.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
In 5 years, I will have my own private practice.
Jeez. What does that consist of exactly?
So I will be the owner of my own therapy clinic. Okay.
And then you hire different therapists?
Yeah. So I would obviously work as well, but I would kind of build my brand and my business name.
Okay. Well, I'm just curious, like, what does it take to like even get there?
A lot. Because I don't have the educational background with business and marketing and that type of things.
That's a whole different thing.
I'm learning as I go, to be honest with you.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm, of course, the more clinical side of things.
Yeah.
So I am relying on other people in different fields to bring
together.
Insight and to help to kind of bring things together.
Okay,
yeah.
fair.
I'm just the expert. I don't know how to start a business. No idea.
Fair.
I'll start. My step one was definitely watching your podcasts. So I would say that.
Yeah. Okay. Dope. Let everybody know where they can contact you, maybe for services or anything like that.
Absolutely. So my email address is z.psychotherapy@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at psychotherapy with Z. There I do have resources listed. Yeah. If you are interested in myself or my clinic, you can go on there, find the portal, book a consult.
Yes, free. It's a free one.
Consults are free.
Okay,
Consults are free. Yeah.
And do you have any last words for anybody about therapy?
Any last words? There's a lot of stigma around shame in seeking help.
Yes.
And that's a tough one to kind of overcome. And maybe I find that sometimes a lot of people don't understand client confidentiality in therapy. So similar to your doctors, everything you share in that room stays in that room.
Yes.
Of course, in different things like supervision, I bring up different cases and different clients to kind of get guidance from other therapists. Yeah. But in terms of discussing cases with the outside world or whatever, that does not happen. And I'm held in the law by that, right? Okay. And the only time I can bring confidentiality is in the case of I found out that you've harmed someone or you're going to harm yourself. Okay. So I find that having that understanding is really helpful, and it allows people to be like, okay, this is a safe space. Like she's not going to go with a speaker and tell everyone my dirty secrets. Your therapist has also heard it all. Yeah. You're not going to shock them.
Yeah, really. There's nothing that shocked you?
I mean, of course, things shock me for sure, but I'm not entering a session like, oh, what am I going to hear today? Yeah. Right? I'm obviously in the understanding that people are using this space to talk about really difficult topics and subjects. So with that understanding, it is hard to kind of shock your therapist. Also, we've been through so many years of studying and reading case notes. So we've heard a lot. True.
Well, I want to thank you for coming because this was needed and this was a requested episode. So I hope everybody got what they needed out of it because I sure did. And you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much for having me. That was a really productive conversation.
Yeah, super dope. And episode 31, Black is the New Rich.
Everything black on black. If I study that facts on facts.